But now moving on, we're going to talk next about muscle length and hypertrophy, because the length of your muscle during training actually plays a significant role in hypertrophy, just as how I just said that stretching your muscle out under load produces more hypertrophy. Studies have shown that training the muscle at longer lengths and tension under stretch are more hypertrophic, more so than when the muscle is shortened. So isn't that interesting? You might think that during an exercise, the peak contraction is the most important part of the movement, and getting as much of a contraction as possible and really squeezing it as much as you can is the most important thing you can do in an exercise, but it is actually not. It is actually the opposite end of the movement that is most hypertrophic when you are all stretched out, as long as the tension is maintained. And so training in a way that is focused on maximizing the part of the movement in which you are under stretch, or the bottom of the exercise, is an important way to optimize hypertrophy. And there are two studies on this. The first is called Greater Hamstrings Muscle Hypertrophy but Similar Damage Protection After Training at Long versus Short Muscle Length by Sumiaki Mayo et al., which trained two different groups of trainees with both seated and laying leg curls. Because when you are doing a seated leg curl, your hips have hinged, causing a 90-degree angle, and that hamstring muscle down there is getting stretched out more and is longer. And when you are lying down, it is shorter. Okay? And the next study is called Elbow Joint Angles in Elbow Flexor Unilateral Resistance Training Determine its Effects on Muscle Strength and Thickness of Trained and Non-Trained Arms by Shigeru Sato et al., which trained two different groups with partial preacher curls in two different halves of the movement, the lower half and the upper half. And surprise, surprise, both studies showed more hypertrophy with both of the groups training at longer muscle lengths. So how do we use this information in our training in order to optimize hypertrophy? This data has three different practical training implications. One, exercises that train the muscle at greater length and stretch should be favored over those that don't. For instance, doing overhead tricep extensions versus doing dumbbell kickbacks. All right, the overhead tricep extensions stretch out the triceps, the kickbacks shorten it. So when you have to favor one of these two exercises or any other exercises like them in your training, favor the one that lengthens the muscle and or stretches it. Okay? 2, full range of motion to the lowest, most stretched out point in a movement is of the utmost importance, okay? Just so long as that does not cause you any discomfort or put you in a disadvantageous position or at risk of injury, such as with squats. All right, so with squats, while going all the way ass to the grass is going to cause more hypertrophy in your muscles, it's also going to round your lower back a little and put your connective tissue under a strain and put you in a very disadvantageous position and possibly cause you pain or injury. So you do not want to stretch out your muscles and make them longer by going to the bottom of a movement that might hurt you, okay? That's not a good trade-off. And of course, you wouldn't use this with any movements that at the bottom you are locked out and you lose all of your tension. All right, but on any other movements, make sure you are going all the way down to the lowest point of the exercise where you're all stretched out. Because as I talked about when I talked about exercise technique, there's a huge difference between going down to here on your bench press and going all the way down to here. It may not look like a lot, right, to just go like an inch or two lower, but in terms of the muscle's getting so much more stretched out by just that 1 or 2 inches of movement at the bottom. So make sure you use a full range of motion and maximize your stretch at the bottom of your exercises whenever you can. And finally, number 3, since going to the lowest point of the exercise is actually more important, if you are to ever do partial reps for any exercises and focus on just one part of the movement, that part should be the bottom part in which you are all stretched out, not the top as many people do. That is, at least in most cases. There are some exceptions, like with the squat. Obviously, again, don't be stretching yourself out in a way that is going to hurt you, but again, the general rule is that if you're going to do partials, you should be doing them at the bottom and not the top.